বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।
Hello everyone, welcome to Hindu Analysis for 17th August 2021. Hope you are all doing well and staying safe. So today we'll be discussing about two topics mainly. One is the Gati Shakti master plan and the second thing is the evolving situation in Afghanistan. When you are dealing with subjects that are related to international relations, Afghanistan, particularly during this exam, might play an important role or a larger role than it would have otherwise given the current situation in Afghanistan. So we'll be discussing a lot of information regarding as to how things came about to the point where there is no government in Afghanistan, and essentially Taliban overtook Afghanistan within a span of 10 to 15 days. So let us begin with the first article, that is Taliban asset control over Afghanistan. So as I said earlier, President Ashraf Ghani flew out of the country on Sunday night. We don't know to where, as Taliban started encircling the capital, that is Kabul. We saw Taliban capture cities, major cities that were under the control of government over the last few classes when we were discussing Afghanistan. We discussed at length as to how Afghan government controls the provincial capitals, but the rural areas is where the Taliban are dominant. And that prediction kind of overturned on itself as soon as in the last 10 days alone, majority of the provincial capitals started falling into the hands of Taliban. Now let us look at the scenario in Kabul itself, the capital city itself, which was a bastion of the Afghan government. Now the first were to surrender were the police and other government forces. They started giving up their posts, the security checkpoints, their police stations, their vehicles, their armory and everything else into the hands of Taliban. And as soon as the police and other government forces surrendered to the Afghan Taliban forces, Taliban militants took over those checkposts across the city, and finally they entered the presidential palace, which was home to the president of Afghanistan for the last 20 years. Now they currently control the entirety of Kabul. They are dictating who goes in, who goes out. As far as some of the videos that you might have seen on social media platforms regarding the Karzai International Airport, the scenario is far worse than what one might have an understanding of. As of the current scenario, though this is not related to exam, I thought it would be helpful to know. Essentially, it is divided into two places. The civilian part of it is being controlled by the Taliban. The military side of the same Karzai International Airport is being controlled by American security forces. The American government has decided to send some 1,000 more troops to secure the military side of the Afghan International Airport, so that they can evacuate their own citizens, their embassy staff, and any of their allies that they deem fit to be evacuated. As of now, the scenario is simple. India is also trying to evacuate its citizens who are still stuck in Afghanistan. As far as the information that one might have, embassy staff and non-essential staff have already been evacuated, and we are just waiting for the civilian operations of the airport to open up under the control of Taliban, so that we can pull out other Indians stuck in Afghanistan. This is not related to exam, but this is the current scenario in Afghanistan is. Now we have an update in the sense of recognition from international partners. China was the first major nation to flag support to the Taliban by stating that we are ready for friendly relationship with Afghanistan, and which is under the control of Taliban. Now yesterday we discussed as to what was the reason that Taliban could gain control of such large cities or large swaths of territory in just a matter of 10 days. Now there are myriad of reasons, but we need to go about in a structured way. So this all started in February of 2020. when the Trump administration signed an agreement or started negotiating an agreement. Sorry, they signed an agreement with the US government in February of 2020, right? Taliban signed a peace agreement with Trump administration or the US government in February of 2020. In order to achieve that, the Trump administration at that point of time appointed a special envoy for Afghanistan who was entrusted with the job of directly negotiating with the Taliban itself. When I say directly, no government or any of the Afghan government representatives were present in those negotiations, meaning in the sense that they hadn't had a chance to express their views. It was a direct negotiation between the American government and the Taliban militants. So it was, as I repeatedly said, that was the turning point for Taliban because it legitimized Taliban's existence. Till that point of time, it was a terrorist organization, it was a ragtag group of mercenaries or whatever you call that. But when the Trump administration in 2020 decided that we are going to negotiate a peace deal with Taliban directly without the involvement of Afghan government, it meant that the Taliban have finally achieved their legitimate status, meaning an important stakeholder in Afghanistan. Now this deal was signed. The deal had simply one option, that is America is going to pull out of Afghanistan. In return, Taliban will do two things. One, they are not going to, or they no longer going to attack American troops present in Afghanistan. Two, they are not going to allow Afghan territory, which under the control of Taliban, to be used as a terror base. So that was the concession that America got from that peace deal. It didn't have any stipulations regarding a political settlement to the Afghan issue, a political settlement to the peace process. The Taliban at one point of time did not even entertain a ceasefire agreement between Taliban and the Afghan government. The deal entirely hinged on the assurances that Taliban is not going to let terrorist groups use or operate from Afghan soil, and two, until the pullout happens, they are not going to attack American troops. But instead what happened was they stuck to that end of their bargain. But what they did not stick to that was they said that we are not going to attack American troops, but we are going to attack and assassinate other civilian population who aided American troops during their 20-year war. So the moment the peace deal was signed, it was a victory written in the name of Taliban because they felt a sense of victory. What impact that this peace deal or the so-called peace deal had on the psyche of the Afghan troops was that it was a moral hit on their psyche. War is not only one on your brute strength but also on the psyche. That is where you develop the concept of psyops, psychological warfare operations, which are entirely dependent on demoralizing your opponent through messaging, through any channel that is available, so that they are demoralized and they don't have the zeal or the need to fight in themselves. That is one of the biggest things that wars are won on. And this agreement was a sense of morale boost for Taliban, but also a demoralizer for Afghan troops who were fighting for their country. Yes, they had hundreds of problems in their in their army, but one thing you cannot say them or point out them or call them is cowards, because remember when we were discussing it yesterday, they haven't been paid their salaries for months. Despite that, they showed up, or at least a majority of them showed up to defend their country. But what subsequently happened is everybody's guess, but nonetheless it was a demoralizing shot at Afghan troops' psyche. And immediately the deal was signed, whoever were pro-Taliban, they started communicating with the Taliban and regional partners. They started celebrating the Doha deal because it was signed in Doha, and they started marketing this as Taliban's victory over America. And to a great extent, it was true. Now, one of the biggest assets that I have already explained in the past was that the biggest advantage that Americans had over Taliban were their air power. So during the peace negotiations or the American and Taliban negotiations, in order to facilitate the agreement itself, right, in order to ensure a smooth negotiations between the Taliban representatives and the US government representatives, American airstrikes on Taliban targets went down drastically. So the Americans stopped conducting airstrikes on Taliban targets, and in return, Taliban stopped attacking American troops. Now, what this essentially made was, or did was, this allowed Taliban to regroup openly. Earlier, it was very hard for them to regroup. If there was any indication that commanders of Taliban were regrouping, America would immediately carry out airstrikes on those targets. It was a hell on Taliban because they couldn't regroup openly. If they tried to regroup in any other area, immediately airstrikes would follow. Now, with that gone, they had a free and open invitation to regroup. And that is what happened. They started regrouping, they started amassing their strength, and they were refurbishing themselves with weapons, with ammunition, and they were augmenting their supply lines. So what used to happen earlier was if Taliban started an offensive on a capital city or a town, the Taliban forces would start the offensive. The Afghan forces would retaliate, and the retaliation by the Afghan forces would be supported by American Air Force. It not only targeted the fighters, but it also targeted the supply chains to the Taliban fighters, all while securing supply chains to the Afghan forces. With that air support or air cover gone, the threat that American Air Force posed to Taliban supply lines, which are an important element in any war or offensive, the supply chains or supply lines are a critical component. That is, if you establish a strong and defensible supply line, you are assured your win. That is why America was so dependent on Pakistan also, because they needed the supply routes from Pakistan to their territory. They couldn't go with Iran because of the hostility. If Iran was a friendly country, the relationship that US has with Pakistan is a non sequitur. But nonetheless, that was the relationship that Pakistan played, and they won in this case. That's a discussion for another time. But they were able to refurbish their men. They were able to recruit new people, and they were able to establish strong supply lines. Now, the other thing that happened was that the moment they signed a deal, Taliban started reaching out to other countries. They started reaching out to China, they started reaching out to Russia, they started negotiating with Iran so that they don't become a party in the future fight. They were planning for a big offensive. The Taliban at no point of time gave up the dream of putting a big fight against the Afghan government. With the Americans gone, they didn't want to take the chance of other countries getting involved. So they started reaching out to other countries, and for whatever reason, they were met with warm response. One would assume that if Taliban is reaching out to you, you wouldn't even have a thought in your mind about encouraging that. But regional realities are regional realities. And these countries, China, Russia and Iran, started encouraging them and have started negotiating with them even before the US troops left the country. Now that is the role of US Air Force. That was the role that they played, and that was the deal that Americans had. As a result of it, it was the first knock on the fall of Afghan government in Taliban. The second that we would discuss is the Ghani administration, right? The Ghani administration, since it came to power, was entirely divided. It was not only internally divided, it was externally divided also, because there were a lot of opposition to the Ghani administration, both from inside the government and outside the government. Both the elections that his administration won in 2014 and in 2019 were disputed by everybody in the power halls of Afghanistan. But after both the elections, he was ally of America, so they supported him. They came in, they made bargains on behalf of him, and they made a deal between Mr. Ghani and one of his main rivals, who was very vocal and who was powerful too and was capable of overthrowing Mr. Ghani himself, was Abdullah Abdullah, the principal negotiator for American interests in Afghanistan, and was the interlocutor for American government with the Taliban. He was the architect, or he was the voice of the peace deal that Americans signed with Taliban. So that was the bargain that they made, that America is also going to give him a powerful and recognizable position. That was the ploy that they used to stitch or to join the divided government into a single entity. But that did not last for long, because you started seeing cracks appearing the moment they came to an agreement. Because you had on one side Abdullah Abdullah, who was a popular leader, who was powerful, who had the support of regional warlords. On the other side, because Abdullah Abdullah was half Tajik and half Pashtun, and he couldn't project himself as a rightful Pashtun leader. On the other hand, Ghani was a Pashtun leader, full Pashtun. So what he did was he started projecting himself as the rightful leader of Afghanistan, because he felt that Afghanistan needed a rightful Pashtun leader, and he started projecting himself in that role. And what happened was that, as I said earlier, he started distancing and alienating other regional ethnic leaders, warlords, and other generals who made up the erstwhile Northern Alliance that resisted Taliban in the 1990s. Northern Alliance was the key factor in defeating Taliban, and was the only power in 1990 that was able to resist the rise of Taliban and kept them in check, at least in northern provinces. But what happened was that, because of the internal strife, internal cracks, the divide, the inability to take command of his country or his forces or his administration, he could not build a robust enough administration that could put up some sort of a resistance against the Taliban forces, or could come up with an administrative structure that had the best interest of his country in power. Now, what he essentially did was he took away the weapons from warlords. He didn't give them weapons, he didn't fund them, he didn't strengthen them. So instead of doing that, he did the opposite. He started weakening the former warlords in the Northern Alliance, because, as I said earlier, he wanted to support the national army and project the idea of national army. But it did not happen as he thought, because of his political base started eroding. So at the end of the day, any action that he carried out, instead of supporting the anti-Taliban coalition, it weakened the anti-Taliban coalition further. So what effect it had was that, once it was pretty clear that Americans were leaving Afghanistan, whatever the weaker administration that was there to begin with started to become much weaker. What it took Taliban was that a simple push from outside, and it crumbled on its own without any further violence. When Taliban entered Kabul, they didn't even fire a single shot. Now, what Mr. Biden, President of United States, did was that he just not only withdrew the air support, or the American air support that was provided to the Afghan security forces, He essentially pulled out the intelligence agents that were posted there, who were supporting the Afghan security forces. And also, not that whenever we discuss about the Afghanistan Air Force, the Afghanistan Air Force was a oh, compared to what Taliban had, it was an okay Air Force. But the problem was that the service and maintenance of those aircrafts and warplanes, particularly the fighter jets and helicopters, were being carried out by American contractors, not Afghan National Army or Afghan Air Force. It was the American contractors who were maintaining the Afghan warplanes and helicopters. The Afghanistan Air Force did not have the technical know how as to how to maintain their own air force. So, with the peace deal signed, with the date set, American air support was pulled out. Along with it, gone were the intelligence officers and also the contractors who were maintaining the Afghan air force that was giving Afghan security forces an edge over the Taliban. So he essentially took majority of the advantages that Afghan security forces had with a single deal. Now, the biggest thing that happened was the psychological aspect of it. The psychological impact of this withdrawal of the Biden administration or American troops was debilitating because it simply meant that the Afghan security forces didn't have a functional and potent air force. The Afghan air force at this point of time was relegated to the hangars. The superiority that Afghan troops had in the war was gone. And add to that, the Taliban went on an assassination campaign targeting Afghan pilots. Remember, we were discussing in few earlier classes as to how they started targeting Afghan pilots, and at this point of time, they don't have enough pilots to pilot those helicopters and their warplanes. The second thing, as I said, supply lines are critical in any offensive or defensive. What Taliban was doing was that they were in the first stage they took control of rural districts. The moment they had control of rural districts, they started taking one city at a time. What they would do, they would take the surrounding areas, they would come to that city, they'll lay siege to that city, meaning they encircle that city, close all entry and exit points into the city. And the moment they take control of roads coming in and out of the city, essentially what happened was that the supply lines that existed or the supply lines that supported Afghan troops was gone. With no reinforcement coming, with no food, no ammunition, no air support, what happened was that the psyche of the Afghan security forces who were entrusted with protecting that city was completely gone within 1 or 2 days. So they had two options. Either they are going to get killed in the hands of Taliban in the fighting with no backup, no air support, no ammunition, no food coming for them in the next 2 or 3 days, or simply give up at this point of time, surrender, hand over all the equipment, including men, to the Taliban, and Taliban would spare their lives. And guess what the Afghan security forces chose? They chose the later option. That is how they started gaining control of Afghan cities. Now, the biggest blowback happened in the country's north. Northern Alliance, the name itself says that the entire northern part of the country was the most anti-Taliban place that you could find in Afghanistan. Whatever the anti-Taliban resistance existed in Afghanistan prior to 1990 was from northern province. And because of this inability to supply their own troops, because of the decisions that Ghani government took to weaken the warlords, the first place that fell was the northern part, which was supposed to be the most stringent opponent of Taliban's rise and growth. Now later, the biggest turning point for the entire conflict came on August 6th. Because Zaranji was the first city to fall into the hands of Taliban. From then on, it was a matter of time, because as I told you, these people, soldiers, weren't getting paid, so they chose to give away and walk away from their positions, surrendering their equipment, by the way, which America and other allies paid for, to Taliban, instead of getting killed in the hands of Taliban, knowing that their government is not going to support them. And mind you, in some cases, Taliban was paying pocket money to the surrendered soldiers because they weren't getting paid salaries for months together. So that was the fate or turn of events that changed the entire conflict on its head. Now they well knew that whoever resisted were going to get killed. Whoever carried out successful operations in the past against Taliban were going to get hunted and killed. So they chose to save their lives and surrender rather than fight till death for a government that is not going to support them. And the psychological aspect, even the US abandoned this government. What is the point of us fighting to protect this government? Even the most favored ally, that is US, also surrendered. The second aspect that Taliban did was, whichever city they took control of, the first thing that they went to was the prisons. They started recruiting prisoners and they started adding them into their structures, right? Ranks. So that is how multiple cities fell in Taliban within 8 days. Now, August 14th came. Kabul was surrounded, and Mr. Ghani tried to show a brave face. He said that he is going to remobilize Afghan troops, but at this point of time, everybody knew it was just a matter of time. And he tried to show face, but the war has already been lost. At least in the minds of the security forces, it was already lost few months back when America decided that they are going to pull out of Afghanistan. And mind you, no one was willing to fight for one city alone, that is Kabul. So to conclude, life is back at square one for millions of Afghans. In the later class, in the next class, that is tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we'll be discussing about the implications of this development on India. Along with it, we'll be doing some sort of a revision of the Indian role in Afghanistan since 2001. Since 2001, we re-established diplomatic relationships with Afghanistan. Then we went on an aid path where we built roads, we built dams, we built buildings and educational centers. We'll be discussing all those things in the next few classes whenever we find time. But this is the area where we have to be careful. Now, to understand the rise of Taliban and fall of the government, let me show you a simple video. So this is from a Washington think tank. You can see from November 2017 to August 15th, see the rapid pace of control of Taliban increasing. Since July, they have gained a lot of territory, and this is August 15th, 2021. Look at the area that they control. Today is August 17th. This was just 3 days back. So this was the issue as to how Taliban were able to control large swaths of territory, one province at a time, and even before that, large swaths of territory were contested. But now there is no contested area between Afghan government and Taliban. Most of it is under the control of Taliban. So, as I said, we'll be discussing in later classes as to how India provided aid and support to Afghanistan in the next coming few classes. Moving on to the next article, in a bit related to the Afghanistan scenario. Yesterday, United Nations Security Council meeting was held to discuss the scenario in Afghanistan. As you know, the United Nations Security Council is being headed by India for this month. And during this meet, the UN Secretary General pointed out or asked the insurgents to protect the rights of Afghans. So he said that I remind all parties for their obligation to protect the civilians. I call upon the Taliban and all parties to respect and protect international humanitarian law and rights and freedoms of all persons, particularly women. In this meeting, countries that voiced supported for Taliban were Russia, China. The representative of Afghanistan made a plea to international community to support Afghan forces and to protect its civilians and protect rights violations in Afghanistan. Pakistan was denied from speaking during this meet, for which they were very sad, one can say. But nonetheless, the scenario is very grim. India has little options left in this area. As we discussed in earlier classes, India is being sidelined by the trio plus grouping, also Russia, US, Pakistan and China. India did not find a place there. India's permanent representative was appraised of this by saying that India has great concern, or the scenario in Afghanistan is a great concern to India, as Afghanistan is a neighbor and a friend to the people of India. As far as what China has said, China stated that they take note of what is being said by Afghan Taliban on Sunday, and they are willing to negotiate and establish an communication line with the Taliban. And as far as that, we have to wait and see how this thing will progress. So before going into that, if you're making notes in regards to Afghanistan, please do be aware of further developments will take place in the future. So be ready to make additions to these notes, and we'll be discussing those important developments as they come along. For today, this might be enough to cover as to what is happening and what were the reasons as to why Taliban was able to gain control of capitals and Kabul in a span of 10 to 15 days. Now moving on to the next, that is Gati Shakti Master Plan. On 75th Independence Day speech, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that his government will launch a PM Gati Shakti Master Plan. So we don't have much details of it. I just wanted you to be aware of this plan. This is not the same as the National Infrastructure Pipeline. That is a different thing. This is a different thing. As far as how those two things are related, we don't know, because we don't have all the details regarding the Gati Shakti Master Plan. But mind you, the National Infrastructure Pipeline is different from PM Gati Shakti Master Plan. So PM Gati Shakti Master Plan is 100 lakh crore, that is 1 billion project for developing holistic infrastructure. This is going to be a National Infrastructure Master Plan that is going to be the foundation for holistic infrastructure development, and will try to give an integrated pathway to our economy. The primary focus is to help industries in India to rise to the global profile, meaning making local manufacturers into global manufacturers, and try to help them and support them in competing with their counterparts in and around the world. Now that would be the primary focus of the Gati Shakti Master Plan. We are trying to increase both manufacturing and export capabilities at the same time. That was the idea and intent behind Atmanirbhar Bharat also, so that we will be self-reliant and we will also become the supply leader for the world, like how China became in the last few decades and currently is also. So once we have major details regarding this, we'll be discussing both Gati Shakti Master Plan, and we'll also try to compare it with the National Infrastructure Pipeline, because what they talk about essentially is developing the infrastructure, but the sectors that they are concentrating on in Gati Shakti Master Plan and in National Infrastructure Pipeline though have convergence but are divergent in nature, because the approach is entirely different, if I am not wrong. But nonetheless, once we have the full details, we'll be going into the Gati Shakti Master Plan in detail, and we'll also be comparing it with the National Infrastructure Pipeline, which was announced by the government in the last year's budget. So thank you, stay safe, namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি, প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।